and I was having an internship at my company and stuff. I hadn't even graduated college yet. So it was college, it was internship, and the Friday of that Evo, I'm sitting with my girlfriend at Taco Bell, and I'm like, I think I could win this. And she's like, all right, let's go.
Welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
Welcome. This is episode 36. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who recently told me that he's not going to play any more team-based games. Is that correct?
I am not. There is just something about my mental stack and me wanting to just focus on a single character. And I think there's a lot of debate about which style fits each individual person best, and I've had a lot of friends throughout the years that have actually stuck with team games, and one of those is actually on our show right now. I'm gonna go ahead and bring on Skillzdatkillz. What's up, AJ? Up? How's it going, man?
Hey, what's good?
Everything is good right now. The state of the world and the state of Hitbox and the fighting game community is good right now. That's actually why I skipped a lot of our intro banter, because I figured we were going to end up talking about Hitbox and the latest news in the community.
Yes, sir.
And my understanding is you have a strong opinion about it. I have a strong opinion about it. And let's see if we align.
Yeah. No, certainly. Yeah.
So to catch up our viewers on the current state of Hitbox in the fighting game community, or specifically leverless controllers, that's the scientific term that we use nowadays. Leverless controllers have the ability to press up and down and left and right all at the same time. There are special rules for left and right that have been agreed upon by the fighting game community for about 10 years now, in that if you press left and right at the same time, it sends a neutral signal, and they basically cancel each other out. That same debate occurred for up and down recently, and right now the standard over the past 10 years has been up and down pressed together equals up. And there was recently a ruling from Capcom for the 2023 CPT season that says that if you press up and down, your controller should actually send neutral instead. That basically creates a new learning curve for Hitbox users. It adds a layer of complexity to the different input shortcuts that are now possible with this new format. And most importantly, in my opinion, it basically forces any current leverless controller that you can buy off the free market with it makes all those leverless controllers out of compliance with the Capcom Pro Tour. So the answer for the community is to work with your hardware manufacturer to provide a firmware update that will allow you to be in compliance to those rules. I tried to say that in the least biased way possible. Does anybody have anything to add as far as news goes and objectively what happened in the past week?
Technically, I think leverless is a semantic thing, but they technically have those things with a D-pad and the buttons on them. So technically that's also leverless, but I think that it's all button controllers, what I've been hearing.
Yeah. I've heard all button controllers too. ABCs. I think that's a pretty interesting acronym to use there. So I'll go ahead and start with my spicy take on it. So number one, I believe that this is a poor decision. This ruling, what it does is by making up and down equal neutral, that seems like a small thing to the average fighting game player, and realistically, it kind of is. But to us hitbox players, it basically requires us to relearn a lot of our combos. It changes our movement. We won't be able to jump from crouching anymore. I'm thinking about it from a Street Fighter lens. I think there's a lot of extra implications from a game with super jumps or air dashes in it as well. Luckily, those aren't impacted yet. I can't imagine what the impact is for a 3D fighter with Korean wave dashing and stuff too. But at least for the Capcom side, or for the Street Fighter side specifically, you won't be able to do perfect flash kicks anymore. So in the past, you could hold down and then you could tap up and kick at the same time while still holding down, which essentially means you can hit two directions at the same time. And I believe that's actually that's like a lesser of two evils thing. I think that people are trying to make the reasoning behind the ruling is to make it more fair. And I get it, and that there is an innate advantage for hitboxes. It's just that I think that this ruling actually creates so many new shortcuts that it's actually more unfair than if we had just left it alone. So I'm all in favor of trying to come up with a solution that everyone in the community is happy with. I think this is a solution that's going to piss off everybody. I think this solution pisses off hitbox users because they feel attacked and because they have to relearn a bunch of new things. And it's like a burden from a consumer standpoint of having to flash your firmware to be able to be in compliance with a tournament rule set. And then on the other end of it, like the folks that are actually saying that, hey, hitbox is unfair and we need to find ways to nerf it. This does not nerf it. This makes it better. So no one's going to get what they want from this ruling, in my opinion. And we need to have a more honest conversation about that. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, that like I just started using a leverless controller recently. Just something that I wanted to actually try to get used to. Personally, I don't think it's for me. So like I haven't really taken the time to learn a lot of those other shortcuts, like other than like, messing around with like the Dawson instant teleports and stuff like that, like trying to figure out how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I figured out how to do that. So but other than that, like I hadn't really messed around too much with the like the charge characters, like you mentioned, like the perfect flash kick. Like, for me, like I wasn't trying to figure out how to use the shortcuts. I was still using the buttons discreetly, right? Like I would hold down and then I would let go, press up, and do the flash kick. And I was like, that's really like a weird kind of way to play. But I was just like, the more I was learning about shortcuts, I was just like, oh, okay, so there are, I knew about the advantages, like you said, like continuing to hold down. I've seen people on Twitter talk about that, and they were just like, I didn't agree with that from the beginning, and you shouldn't be able to do that because that's an inherent advantage over somebody using a stick because you have to go through that motion literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it doesn't for me personally, it doesn't impact me too much because like I'm at the point right now where I'm kind of like deciding whether I want to even continue to learn this or just kind of have it on the side as something just to kind of mess with here and there.
Okay. And you mentioned that hitbox isn't, you're coming to the conclusion that it's not for you. Is there like a particular like outstanding reason for that, or like could you elaborate on that further?
It's just more like I don't know. I'm still having trouble with just natural movement, just like movement in general. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just not something that's intuitive to me, and it's just especially in fighting games. I think that's probably the hardest thing. Like I could play other kind of games on like a keyboard, beat 'em ups where up is up, down is down. But like when it comes to fighting games, like having a jump button really kind of just throws me off, and it's almost like having a block button in a way. Like I've played those games, and it's just like a lot of times I don't end up playing defense unless I'm like in a really kind of forced situation. So I don't know.
Because it's not intuitive, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not intuitive to me in terms of like holding the button versus holding back the block.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. AJ, what about you? What do you think of the hitbox currently in this current ruling, or does it affect you, or is it more like Benny, where it's less of an impact?
Well, I guess it doesn't affect me a ton because with this news, I am even less likely to play Street Fighter 6 now, and this is the only game where this would matter. I think that it's a pretty anti-consumer or anti-player based ruling to have in a way that just it only serves to alienate the players, right? So the best case scenario is somebody comes out, or what they're trying to do is somebody comes out with a cheater hitbox or whatever with up plus down equals up, right? Then you as a player, you've got to snitch on that player. The onus is still on the other player to snitch on the other player and like potentially ruin whatever relationship that they've got there. And nobody ends up being happy about any of it. I'm a hitbox player because I can't play on stick anymore. I played on stick for 10, 11-ish years or something like that. But between playing Firebrand with the wall cling fireballs, my posture admittedly being pretty bad with it, and then going super duper hard for Power Rangers Battle for the Grid training, I can't play on stick anymore. The inside of my forearm itches when I use stick. Like it's pretty bad. And Hitbox gives me a way to play these games, my favorite games, without any pain. And if that means that I can't compete in certain tournaments because of it, that's fine. I'll be hanging out on the side. I'll be playing casuals with my cheater controller or whatever. And it's simply a bigger step towards accessibility by including whatever controllers you can include. A lot of these problems that they're talking about come from these shortcuts that you're just able to do from software side, right? They don't have to parse your inputs like that. You can make a flash kick, for example. That's the big one, skipping from down to up. The argument is that that's not a flash kick, right? That you have to pass through neutral. The game itself can just make you go through neutral, but instead they're putting like the debate on us and just to police each other and yell at each other. And I think it's lazy. I think it's a bad implementation of SOCD rules, and it's just not well thought out at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective you bring up in terms of us policing each other, because it kind of like reminds me of the whole like somebody pauses and do you take the round kind of thing, and putting the onus on the player, right? Like nobody wants to be put in that situation. Like if John pauses while we're playing, like, and then the TO comes to me and he's like, "You want to take the round?" And then it's just like, I don't want that decision to be on me, because it's like if I take the round, everybody's like, "Well, you didn't beat him fair and square." Whereas if I don't take the round and I lose, people will be like, "You should have took the round." And I'm just like, I don't want to be in that position.
Exactly.
The whole point of the rules is it acts as an impartial third party, so that to like not put the onus on the players to basically, because you're basically pitting the players against each other at that point, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're already pitted against each other in the competitive environment anyway. But you know what I mean?
But beyond the integrity and stuff, it's calling other people's integrity into question. Like imagine you think somebody's cheating and they're not, and like they were completely abiding by the rules. Like that's terrible, right? Why would you take the gambit even?
Yeah, it even has an outcome on the match where like I was talking to a friend about this yesterday. If somebody, like if I have a hitbox that's in compliance and then somebody actually does pull that card on me and say, "Hey, I think this guy's cheating. Let's bring over a TO. We'll validate it and stuff like that." I'm not too worried about that, because obviously I'll be in compliance. But that's data where like, okay, so I know that this person is potentially concerned about SOCD shortcuts impacting the outcome of the match. I'm gonna open the game with like a bunch of dash shortcuts. I'm going to start with that just to see if I can get an emotional response out of them. It's not like oh, I'm so badass that I'm just going to rub it in. It's more like, no, if this is from a competitive standpoint, if I know this is a psychological advantage that I can have, I'm going to use that. And it's too much. It's a lot of onus on the players to police each other. It's still. There's another side of this where, like, because I think where this argument got really tangled on social media, or on Twitter at least, where everything's tangled, was that this everyone's just saying the software needs to change in order to actually enforce these things. But I know for Street Fighter 6, we validated this in the beta that they actually do have logic to do that cleaning, and they can control it from their end, but there are a bunch of hardware manufacturers out there that have firmware that forces an input out. So basically, if you press and hold down and up at the same time, it's not that the game is interpreting it incorrectly, it's that the hardware that you're holding is actually hard-coded to actually send out the up signal. And so like Capcom doesn't really have a way to balance around that unless they can get complete control. And I think like from a software development standpoint, at least from my background, at least I've been in situations before where I've been like, okay, there's a problem that I need to solve. I'm going to code it this way and I'm going to try to fix it. Oh shit, it didn't solve the problem. It's actually a problem with an upstream issue with a vendor integration somewhere else. We need to go to that vendor and have them update their side so that way we can have control again. That's a very common paradigm in software development. And so I don't like tinfoil hat. This is Capcom trying to take control of their game and pull power away from the hardware manufacturers, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but like pragmatic. And from my read on this is that they were trying to solve this issue. They didn't figure out a way to solve it. They got stuck, and this was the nuclear option. It was still the wrong answer in my opinion, but I can get it from a development standpoint. I think again that's my bias, but I'm like, they might it might not have anything to do with the consumers. That's my point, is that it's like it's just these companies grappling with each other trying to say, okay, I want you to take away your ability to influence our software, and just let us handle all of it. And I think we as the consumers are caught in the middle because now we're the ones stuck updating firmware. We gave money to these hardware companies and we gave money to these software companies to be able to have this experience, you know?
Yeah, and like AJ said, like I mean, it's something that's only applicable to Street Fighter 6, right? So I mean, people go to tournaments; they're not just playing Street Fighter 6. So your controller could be in compliance for Street Fighter 6, and then you got to go play something else where that's not the way the controller is supposed to work. And like I saw from the I think it was Brook, like they released an update for their stuff to make it compliant, but you have to go use the desktop and there's their software or whatever and update it that way through the desktop, and like that's super inconvenient, right? Mm-hmm. Not everybody's going to have an elegant solution to doing that, and that's not something where you as a player, that's just another thing that you have to deal with now potentially, or you just drop the game entirely and just like, you know what, this is the only game that's implementing this. I'm just not going to play it because now it's causing me, extra problems on the side.
Yeah, bingo. Because again, like you said, it is only Street Fighter 6, right? Even beyond fighting games, you can play a fight stick in Rocket League, in League of Legends, in Valorant. They don't care what controller you use because their software is designed around all sorts of different controllers to be as accessible as possible. We have paradigms in the past or examples where they forced a certain kind of controller, right? There was the MK tournament when MK9 launched, where everybody was forced to play on the MK9 sticks.
Yeah.
And the feedback was almost entirely like, why are you making us do this? Half of the scene, there's a whole modding community within the FGC that's embracing the fact that you can do whatever you want with your controllers. Street Fighter is the only game, not just in fighting games, but in maybe Melee, but but in most video games that is enforcing some kind of controller ban or something like that. And I play on a modified cross-up, which I'm holding up to the webcam right now, right? So this thing out of the box has really awesome firmware that lets me choose which SOCD things I use and whatnot.
Oh, really?
So this one, I don't have like normal SOCD on most of the time. I have last input priority, right?
Oh, you have that. Okay.
Yeah, I usually have last input priority and stuff because a lot of the time I'm not using it to play fighting games. I'm using it for like platformers and stuff like that. And it just makes more sense to me,
Sure.
At least when I'm not playing fighting games and stuff. Even when I'm playing like Marvel 3, there's no rule against last input priority. In fact, most games totally allow you to use last input priority, whatever SOCD you want, to be honest.
Yeah. And last input priority is worth noting. It ties into this hitbox debate too, because or the Capcom ruling, because a common counter argument is that pad players can do it too. You can pad player, like a PS4 pad has a D-pad and an analog stick, so you could theoretically hit left and right at the same time, and a hitbox would clean it and turn it into neutral. But the actual stock Sony PlayStation pad will do last input, like AJ mentioned. So you can actually do things like instant flash kicks or instant booms even. And that's something that even hitbox players can't do.
The smart thing that Street Fighter 6 did do here was that they only allow you to use one set of directions at a time.
As
So
in, you can't use the D-pad and the analog stick at the same time?
yes, you have to map which directional thing you're going to use. So it's either got to be D-pad or it's got to be analog stick.
Okay, that I did not know. I guess, yeah, in the beta, people probably tested that out and were like, hey, if they had a pad hooked up to it, they could tell if they pressed both at the same time, right?
I think it was in the rules or something a long time ago, or I saw it in the button check. That's just something that I thought was notable. I thought that was a clever solve,
Yeah, and again, Street Fighter 6 does do down-up input cleaning. It's just that all of it, the game can't know the difference because all of our hitboxes send up. So like there's all these like little instances where you could tell they thought about it. It's just that then they put this shitty rule on top of everything. The shitty ruling on top of it. And if anything, this could even be like a translation issue where it's like, you have Capcom, the esports side of Capcom, I believe, is primarily based out of America. And so they're trying to enforce it from their end, but the game itself is being developed in Japan. And so it could be just two departments not talking to each other. And they each have a solution to the problem, And unfortunately, those solutions butt heads with each other. And then we're the ones who pay the price as the players and the consumers.
Yeah. Ugh. As I read on Twitter, SOCD's nuts.
Yeah, pretty much. And my other big issue with this, and I burned way too much mental and emotional energy on this issue over the past week, is that, there still is that long-standing debate about whether or not leverless is fair. And I think that when you try to convey this argument to the masses, you need like an infographic or like what Brian F. did with a YouTube video and a photoshopped chart with like different with different axes depending on which controller and then which scenario it was. It was a flow diagram, or it was a state diagram. It was a state diagram, and it's like you need that to explain it. And so the average person is going to see SOCD and wonder what that acronym means, and they're not going to know what the hell's going on. They're just going to be like, cheat box. That's ultimately what it boils down to is this thing fair? But it's easy to get obfuscated in these conversations about SOCD and is down up fair? What about left right? Is that fair? And what about this particular shortcut? Well, if I play whack-a-mole and I kill this shortcut, then it creates this shortcut. Is that one fair? And then we keep having this existential debate because the whole time the people that need to play on Hitbox are like, hey, I just need to know if I can play my video game when we're having these philosophical debates about cheating.
I mean, I think that might be like especially poignant within the FGC, but like you were talking about the masses, right? The masses would be confused, like, wait, I can't play this on my keyboard, kind of thing.
That's a good point too. Yeah, there's FGC layman and then there's actual like gamer layman too, right?
Right. I mean, because this is like a keyboard is an all button controller, right? There's a lot of buttons on that thing.
Yep.
And that's, you'd run into the exact same problems with the SOCD cleaning over there.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's our hitbox debate. Again, that happened this past week. And so we'll see how that evolves in the coming weeks here. I personally think Capcom's going to reverse it. Another good opportunity would be let it rock, but then patch Street Fighter 6 to resolve to up as well, so that way it doesn't change for the people, and that also removes the necessity for a firmware update too. Okay.
Or change the flash kick motion to have to include neutral or include a different direction in between it. Same thing with sonic booms.
You could do that. Yeah, that's a good call. Mm-hmm. That's a good call. A counter argument I saw from a stick user, actually, somebody who doesn't feel hitbox is fair, is that it's actually possible to go down up on stick and not go to neutral. You just got to be really fast. And so that person who was defending stick was like, don't nerf that because then you nerf stick too. And you can't have that. Can't have that. You can't nerf stick. Oh, man. Okay. Anyway, I get toxic when I go on the Twitter and I argue with people about this bullshit, and this is what happens. So I'm going to go just forcibly move us on from a different topic. So it's been a while since we've had a guest on the show that hasn't been on the show before. AJ, this is your first show, and just as like a tradition, we always kind of try to do like a biography segment. So first and foremost, where did your gamer tag come from?
It came from the movie Dodgeball. There's a team called Skillzdatkillz in one part of the movie. Terry Crews is on the team Skillzdatkillz, and I heard that name and I'm like, man, you really wouldn't want to lose to someone named Skillzdatkillz, especially like a tiny Asian kid like named Skillzdatkillz. So I figured that just add to their mental stack, and Art of War give me an advantage.
We were talking about psychological advantages earlier.
Yeah.
That's one way to do it, man.
Nice,
and
nice.
you mentioned
Oh, go ahead.
You mentioned being a little Asian kid. So, how old were you when you started playing fighting games?
Well, I was really little at like the Christown lanes and stuff at the bowling alley and stuff, playing Marvel 2, MK4 and stuff. But when I really got into it would probably be middle school or so with Street Fighter 4-ish. To 2010 is when I got there competitively, but I'd say I was playing since middle school, 09-ish maybe.
Okay. Very cool. So I think you might actually be one of the younger people on our show. I think about it. Sorry, Benny. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just briefly going back to your tag, like, so before Skillzdatkillz, was there another tag that you were using before that people might know you by?
I used this since I was like a young kid.
Okay, so
yeah, so I went under different names under certain other games or something like that, but
yeah,
Skillzdatkillz was early. It was very early. Sills Pays Bills on Xbox. If I couldn't get Skillzdatkillz, other people might have the same idea.
I remember that
because I couldn't do skills. Couldn't do skills. It had to be Sills.
That's great.
Yeah, skills pays bills. Any variation of that, I guess I'm sometimes like that. Chips that rips.
Too much dip on your chip.
Yeah. All right. So when did you decide you were going to start playing competitively again?
Yeah. I got into fighting games on that side, watching the adventures of Mike Ross and Gutex.
Okay.
Yeah, cross counter and stuff. That it was really, really cool. I thought it was hilarious. Even though I wasn't like a big Street Fighter fan, I didn't even have the game at that point. Eventually it did inspire me to like play it a little bit more. But the first game where I thought that I could have a chance maybe competitively was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 vanilla even. And even then I didn't think I'd do super well, but I went to Devastation and I did better than I thought.
Very cool.
Got to like losers finals in my pool, and in casuals I was like destroying people. I had like 100-game win streak, no exaggeration. It was pretty insane, actually.
Nice. And that was probably your first like taste of the competitive like the sweet spot of being competitive, where like you're running a streak on a station somewhere where like an event with a bunch of other enthusiasts of the same thing that you like. That's such a good feeling.
Yeah, funny story about that is I had been part of the AZ fighting game Shoryuken page back in the day. So there were these legends out there. There was this guy Saber 3. That guy. This guy Saber 3. The hunter of MILFs, and he was, a legend. He had some Samuji guy played Zero and stuff like that. And I was like, I can't hang with any of those guys. Those guys are insane. Man. I beat some people, and I was like taking rounds off of people. It was insane. I had no idea that actually everyone is pretty mortal.
Yeah, I think that's like a big reality about the community side of it in general. Well, not just skill wise, but also like you start kind of realizing that these are just normal people, and then like they like the same things that you do. Like I remember I had like I was like intimidated by Scott for a while. Saber 3, the person we're talking about is Scott, who's been on our show numerous times. I think we've done an episode more. I think he's still played fighting games for wait, what am I trying to say? We've done 36 episodes. I think he's been playing fighting games longer than 36 years. Like one episode per year. I was trying to get there with that joke. I didn't get there. But Yeah, I had like almost like I was intimidated by him because I didn't treat him like a normal person. I always thought he was like a celebrity. And nowadays with esports and whatnot, some people actually are like that. But at least
Yeah.
locally in our Arizona scene, I found out that like a lot of people are they're just human beings. Like behind the stream and all the veneer and even the competitive fighting game side of it, we're just like once I started treating people like normal people and that just like the same thing that I like, I was like, this is the community that I was looking for. They're friends instead,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's easy. It's easy to get that kind of celebrity status in a way. Because, like I said, like I'm me being from Alaska, like that was one of the points, big points for me. Like coming down to Arizona, it was just like the more I found out about certain players that lived here or were playing here, and I found out Saber was here. I found out Mr. SNK was here. I found out Latif was here, and I'm just like, I'm going to a place where those guys are like, the top players here. Like that was huge to me. Like I didn't really feel intimidated by them, which is I find it funny like they can use that word for them. Like I didn't really feel intimidated by them. It was just more just like I guess it was more kind of like in awe, kind of just like, oh man, I'm going to be playing with people of these skill levels that I've seen on streams and stuff, and on the national level, that kind of thing.
One of the reasons why I went to Devastation was to get my stick signed by some of my favorite players, Gutex, Mike Ross, Marn, and Juicebox Abel.
Nice.
All of them were in attendance that year, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Was this 2010?
And yipes. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. 2010 sounds right on the money, though.
Okay. Yeah, 2010 sounds about right.
Yeah. That's I think Lorenzo also got his start at Devastation, maybe at that same tournament for Blaze Blue. So
he might have won Blaze Blue.
Yeah, he did. I think he did win that Blaze Blue.
I think he was doing pretty good already by that time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe it was
if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned Marvel 3, and then the game that I think a lot of people probably know you most for is the Power Rangers. What's it?
Battle for the Grid.
Battle for the Grid. That's what it is. Yeah, and you are a 2-time Evo champ, as you were corrected me in the chat last week. Is that correct?
2-time world champ, I guess, because Evo would count as like one of the world championships, and then the other one was the league finale and stuff. So yeah, I'd be the 2-time only official world champ.
Nice.
So cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember just like just going back to Marvel briefly. I remember because during Evos, like I would compile like a list of like results for all of the local players, and I would post it in the AZ group. And I remember like, I had there's people on my mind. I like people that I knew of. And then that was one of the years that Angelic got third. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I had posted all those results, and then I don't know if it was you that commented or somebody else, and they were just like, oh, so-and-so got 25th. And I'm like, what? And so I had to put you in the list too. And I was just like, oh man, like I didn't know that we had another player that was like, that was up, near the top 32 kind of thing. So that was really kind of revealing for me.
Yeah, that's something I was kind of like used to in the community for Arizona, because I couldn't come out all that much, but I would consistently perform kind of high-ish, maybe top 3 or so. Sometimes maybe I dip or something like that, but that's been a consistent kind of placing. And yet nobody ever has my name like in their head when they think about any game, especially for Marvel 3. I never made it to any of the Arizona curly mustaches. I wasn't on Team Hazmat. I wasn't on any of those really the local scenes, and I wasn't really even approached for those things. So it kind of gave me a chip on my shoulder. I gotta show those guys,
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of I mentioned this prior to us starting the taping of the show, but we're kind of doing like a reunion thing here because I was part of that group, and I remember at least initially why we didn't approach you for a lot of those things, and it was as simple as because you were a minor at the time. I remember being like, for Curly Mustache in particular, that one was because we were like, actually, were you a minor at that time? You might not have been. I don't remember.
I was a minor. I was a minor for most of these. So again, like to make the timeline a little clearer, I was in middle school and stuff when I started, but most of the Marvel stuff was high school and early college and stuff. So yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I remember specifically, we were like, what about AJ? Well, it might be kind of hard because he's a minor. we're putting up money and stuff for it. I remember that pretty well. Like just in general, like you were more restricted as far as like like late night training sessions or practice sessions in general because of like something as simple as like needing to get a ride, you know. And I'm bummed out that we didn't like include you more in hindsight.
It was absolutely for the best. It's actually insane that I did half the things I did as a minor. I actually, so for Evo and stuff, I did get to go to Evo basically unattended and chaperoned as a minor, just running around Vegas in random rooms, knocking on hotel doors for money matches and stuff. If I were in your guys' position, or if I were in the position of being a dad to somebody who would be doing this, I could not imagine me letting my kid do the things that I did. Not at all.
Yeah, especially for somebody that doesn't like, parents that don't necessarily understand like what it is that you're doing. Like, I don't know how your parents were, but I know I initially like this is even when I'm an adult, right? And I was like, hey, I'm going to go to my first Evo in 2011. And I was like, they're like, oh, what's that? And I was like, oh, I'm going there to play games. And my parents thought I was gambling. And they're like, oh, you better watch out with your, spending your money gambling. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, I'm playing video game. I'm playing Street Fighter. Like, so to, like you said, to have a minor literally, going from room to room, just talking to online strangers and stuff, meeting people for the first time. Like that's a, that's a crazy thing to go through.
Yeah. And there's one end where you don't know anything about it. Then there's the other end where you know all of it. And like, what if your kid came up to you and was like, man, this guy from Japan has been talking smack about my Dalsim and I need to show him what's up. I need to play him for $100. You'd be like, no.
Yeah, that's a very simple thing. Yeah, I mean, especially if you're a minor, it's like, no, that's my money. I'm gonna have to lend you that money.
You need $100 for what?
Yeah, if G asked you if you wanted to do a Dragon Ball Fighters money match, would you put it up for him, Benny?
I don't know. One, it would depend on the amount, and then two, I would need to kind of do a brief assessment of his skills. Like I'd have to maybe have him run through a gauntlet with some of the locals, and like, let me see if you're really up for this. Or are you just like, are you just wanting to do this just to do it? Like,
nobody batted an eye. I was running around just money matching folks.
You put your son through a kumite to get to like prove that he could play a money match. It reminds me of that scene that show Arrested Development where the dad's trying to teach his kids a lesson and he just hires a crisis actor, and the guy like the crisis actor constantly loses his arm, and it's like, that's why you leave a note. It's like
yeah, I don't know. It's like I've never been put up to that kind of situation. That'd be definitely interesting if he was like, yeah, I saw somebody or I played somebody online and they were talking trash, and I found out they're going to be at Evo. They want a money, I want a money match. And I'm like, what?
I maybe I projected it on you as a kid when we were younger, AJ. But like, I always was really curious about how your strict Asian parents were handling half the shit that we did as Marvel players. Like, because I just didn't tell my parents about most of that stuff, and I know for a fact that they freaked out once they found out about a couple things. Like, I threw a bar fights event, and there were questions about whether or not I was organizing illegal fighting. Like, what is bar fights? No,
I remember I was asking, hey, Dad, can I go to this? It's at a bar and it's called Bar Fights. And he's like, what? As far as Asian parents go, my parents are pretty great, so it's not like 100% of the way, but it's like, hey, go do your thing, but make sure the rest of everything is taken care of as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
And obviously it gets a little bit different later after the Power Rangers Battle for the Grid thing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't making or losing any crazy money during that time. So just the fact that they were like, yeah, go to Vegas alone as a teenager, great. That's as good as that got.
Well, for historical documentation, I will say, as somebody who lives through the Marvel era at least, and we'll get to the Power Rangers one because you're definitely really decorated there. I want to find out a couple more things about that era. But for the Marvel side, at least, I did consider you within the top echelon of players for Marvel versus Capcom 3. Like, in hindsight, I think at the time I was really young and I was constantly talking shit, and I thought I was better than you. But I do believe by the end of it, you you eclipsed me, and then nowadays, like I don't think I could touch you in that game. So good shit, man. You stuck with it.
I mean, so my results were at first I got to losers finals of Evo. I didn't get to go out to many tournaments, but I got to losers finals of Evo, I believe in 2014, 2015 I got top 48, 2016 I got top 32, and 2017 I lost to a stick malfunction, and I'm still salty to this day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's maybe
that's
why you play Hitbox now.
That's part of it. I don't know if you remember my janky sticks and stuff, but I had some pretty janky sticks back in the day.
Was one of them homemade? I can't remember.
None of them were homemade per se. They were always, remember, I talked about that stick that I got signed. I was pretty much using that stick the whole time, but I'd change out the cord. I'd cut the cord and I'd splice the cords together, right? One time I went to a Has local and it just sat at the wrong angle and it started smoking.
It started smoking?
Yeah, it might have been Surge, like, hey, dude, your stick's smoking kind of deal.
That's crazy.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, you must have crossed power or something then.
I absolutely did, because I won't even get into how those things were wired and stuff. But yeah, obviously that was going to happen. But yeah, I think that when you were playing at your most and you were at your most sweaty and try hard at that game, you were definitely a lot better than me. I was never like super good at the game. I think looking back on it, I think it's hard because you have to consider power level relative to everybody else, but the skill level back then was quite low. Just looking back on the replays, comparing it to now, average damage of a combo is much lower. Just the general understanding wasn't as much. So it was everybody's ability to grasp the game quicker than me. I definitely didn't grasp it as fast as you guys did. And that's a whole other skill, in itself, to just adapt yourself to a new game or something like that.
There's also like a group meta that comes into play. Like
exactly.
Our resource consumption for Marvel 3 changed once we figured out that we could kill a character in one combo, right? But prior to that, we relied on DHC glitch, we relied on resets, and then that in turn changed our X Factor usage, our bar usage, and changed the flow of the match drastically. Versus nowadays, where it's refined to like you get 3.5 guesses or 3 guesses and you're done. If you do it right. And it's I think the group meta back then was just figure out how much damage you could do and then get out of dodge, so that way you don't get like mashed out somehow, But then over time, people like you yourself you pioneered new ways to reduce the amount of player exchange, and we're like, what if I just unblockable you with Firebrand? Yeah. Or, what if I use these log trap techniques or the wall cling stuff with Firebrand, right? Like, there's the downside of people that lean on experience, I think, compared to someone coming in fresh and green, is that the experience can also result in biases out of the gates. And then oftentimes experienced players are the ones that have a harder time picking up a new game. Like a lot of the Marvel 2 players didn't really take to Marvel 3 out of the gates. I don't think there were very many in our local Arizona scene that actually stuck with Marvel 3 and continued to play it competitively after vanilla. But then there was this other like mid-generation, which was my generation, of people that had experience with a fighting game before, but not a Marvel game. And then we took to 3. And then you represented the next generation after that, which was a whole new, that blew my mind in general, because I always was used to being the youngest in the room. And you guys have a completely different way of looking at things. How you approached Marvel was very drastically different than how I approached Marvel, or how a lot of people, like someone from Saber's generation, approached Marvel. And I think that you guys changed the game for the better in the long run. I remember how we played. I remember the low level. I watched some videos of it recently. Okay.
Yeah. Trying to get back.
I've been waxing nostalgia about Marvel, but I do want to talk about Power Rangers a little bit. So, 2-time world champ here. So Evo, how big was the tournament that you won at Evo?
Oh man, so that's the story about that game, is that it's very small. I
Okay.
think that tournament probably the Evo tournament probably only had, man, maybe 40 to 60 something players. Actually, it might have been higher. Might have been
Okay.
higher. Might have been 60 to 100 actually, if you include some of the DQ people. But then once everybody DQ'd and stuff, it probably went down to 40 to 60 or something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
and it was like really funky rules. So this was a fever dream. This was literally insane. I can't believe that any of the Evo stuff happened. I had been an online warrior in Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, a game that most of you guys have not heard about, right? I saw the game and I thought, wow, that looks bad. Let me play it, right? And it turned out to be it turned out to be an amazing game over the course of time, and maybe one of my favorites of all time. And then Evo comes around and the side event comes up and it's run by Cross Counter,
Okay.
prior to a certain event where, a certain leader of that organization might not be in good standing with everybody. But, at that time, it meant something, and it was for like a couple $100 or something like that. And I was having an internship at my company and stuff. I hadn't even graduated college yet, so it was college, it was internship, and the Friday of that Evo, I'm sitting with my girlfriend at Taco Bell, and I'm like, I think I could win this, and she's like, all right, let's go. So
Nice.
as I'm crumpling up my crunch wrappers and stuff and throwing it away, I'm trying to book like an Airbnb to get over there that night, and we found a cheap enough one that was open. I'm cycling through all of them because who takes last minute bookings? This person accidentally left their place up by mistake, and I slid in.
Oh,
So yeah, and I
okay.
slid in there. Yeah.
So this is really like a chance of fate here.
Yeah.
that led to this. Okay.
And it's
Wow.
nighttime. So we head to the gas station. We get all the supplies that we think we need for this trip. Hey, mom and dad, we're gonna go to Vegas for the weekend.
AJ thinks he's gonna win a video game tournament.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna win a video game tournament. I wouldn't even say I'm gonna win, right? My parents weren't strict, but they were always really brutal with their roast and stuff. Did you win? No. Oh yeah, like always, kind of.
Okay. Still got the Asian parents in them then. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of it. So I'm gonna go play this video game on the weekend. They're like, oh, okay, just like high school. And so I went down to Evo, and it's in the middle of the night. We're really tired. A deer popped up in the middle of the road while we were both like drowsy and stuff, and that gave us a jolt. Kept us awake through this long drive to Vegas. We make it to the Airbnb. She had to call her neighbor because she wasn't there to clean everything up. We make it there safe and sound. And the next day I had to register like on site, or maybe I registered in the car or something. The Saturday bracket of it, I run through everybody in casuals. Nobody can touch me, right? And the first game is somebody who doesn't play the game, right? Their name is Jacko Man. They're actually a pretty big name in the Marvel community.
Yeah,
definitely. And he's just happy to be there.
Yeah,
and I'm
guy.
happy to see him, happy to play him, obviously. And my buttons are wrong. First game, my buttons are wrong, and he takes the game off of me. He's the first person to take a single game off of me because my buttons are wrong, and it's in tournament.
Your hot streak ended.
Dude, I was tilted.
At the worst time, man. At the worst time.
Absolutely tilted. Yeah, that whole run was insane because there was like a really toxic community member who only went there to play Power Rangers Battle for the Grid,
Okay.
And his name is Evan. He'd scream stuff, and he'd say stuff that I can't repeat on here. It's pretty gross,
Okay.
In the spirit of Marvel, generally, he's gotten in trouble. He's gotten banned, in fact, for this kind of thing, as a lot of folks have been. He's gotten banned for some pretty horrible, insensitive comments. But he was at that tournament, and he was probably the main threat, I'd say, that I had.
See, your storyline even has a heel involved.
Yeah, there's like side quests and stuff. Like I went there, and GX from the Japanese communities there, and there's this whole other side storyline about the Arkansas scene, because the Arkansas scene is randomly good at Battle for the Grid, right?
Really?
They're
Okay.
Yeah, and we'd been talking about on Discord that they have the Arkansas tech. You will not be able to mess with the Arkansas tech. And no one believed him. No one knew anything about it. We get there, and it's an Arkansas player versus GX from Japan. And the Arkansas tech is essentially, it forces you certain characters into situations where they cannot tech throws, and you can loop it. So
okay.
he gets a reset on Udana from GX's Udana, throws him, and GX is like teching. Next time, throws him again. GX looks down, mummy, you know.
Okay.
Just
wow.
He completely gets drained. He had no idea what happened to him, because we can't talk to the Japanese people. They have no idea about the Arkansas tech, you know.
Yeah, usually it's the Japanese doing that back to us. That's interesting hearing that, because
it was Arkansas.
Yeah, it was Arkansas.
Yeah, of all places. Yeah.
You know who would get a kick out of that story is Jeff, I think, because a lot of the older like Street Fighter 2 guys, you know, they have the memory of going to Japan, and then or like the Japanese coming over and showing them things that they just like didn't even think were possible in the game. And I think he would be tickled pink to hear that, you know, generations of fighting game players later, that shit is still happening.
Yeah. I didn't know what it was. I'm like, hit him with the Arkansas tech, and he hits him with the Arkansas tech. I'm like, oh my God.
I remember hearing about that there's like a throw reset loop. I didn't know that you couldn't tech the throw.
Yeah, it's a really obscure glitch that was in the beginning of the game, right? And eventually I end up beating that Arkansas player,
okay.
You know, and I get to Evan, who I'm in winner's side of the bracket, by the way. I get to Evan, who is pumped. You know, he's pumped. He starts ripping off his shirt and sitting on his chair in a way where his feet are like on the bottom of the chair, and he starts talking mad smack, you know, controller in hand. And I am terrified. At this point, my mental game is not that great. It's okay. It's weathered, but it's not great, you know? And he's yelling during game, I'm going to grab your little ass. I'm going to get inside. Like crazy.
Okay.
Actually insane. But he keeps doing it. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's when he's going to come in. So he goes, I'm going to grab your little ass. And then I counter hit him on the way in with crouch short. And he's like, oh no, like an actual boss. It was actually insane. Right.
Like he was saying his word, like a video,
it was like an
a
actual
90s
boss
video game boss,
Yeah,
with like shitty voice acting.
Yeah, like giving away his tail, like his pattern.
Yeah, like before, and then because at first you're like, oh my God, I can't lose this guy.
Yeah.
And then it's a pattern. Like he's a video game boss. And he's a fan of Mega Man, which is so ironic, right?
I was going to say, he sounds like a Mega Man X6 boss, like with the shitty voice acting and like a really stupid pattern. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Each time you do it. And then that's how I beat him. And that's how I got to the grand finals. That come to find out, grand finals is in the esports arena at the Luxor. So my name, TTSDK, is on the Luxor pyramid.
Wait, it was on the Luxor pyramid?
It was on the Luxor pyramid. TTSDK
Do you get a picture
versus
of that?
Arkansas Smoke Max. It's somewhere. Yeah, I'll
That's
tell
tight.
you that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so cool.
Yeah, a bunch of weird stuff happens, and Butex is up there for like hours, and no one knows what he's talking about. And then we it was weird. It was supposed to be like a 20-minute intro. Weird time. We finally go out there, and the grand finals is 1st to 5. I win 5-0. Everyone's going crazy in the crowd, and then the lights go dark, and a guy in a Power Rangers costume comes to the stage. He unmasks himself, and it's Clockwork, who had been working on the game,
Right, right.
and he takes away my trophy and challenges me to a 1st-3, and I beat him 3-0, and he gives me my trophy back, and that was my night at Taco Bell.
Wow, dude. I didn't know that happened. They did the Ghost of Marvel thing, but like official?
I can't
Clockwork
believe this
challenged?
happened.
I've never seen that happen in an Evo champion before. It's like the developers like, I'll challenge you to a fight, and then like that's a great marketing thing, but also holy shit, that's a once in a lifetime experience for you. Wow.
Yeah, all of that was so. And prior to this, it's Vegas, so my girlfriend and I, we got a place to eat. We got all you can eat hot pot, so I'm sweating and I'm full, and I look like 50 pounds heavier than I actually am, and the room is like hot, and I don't have a haircut, and it's just like I'm looking bad, and because I feel bad, I feel terrible. I feel like I'm gonna throw up the whole time.
Oh man, I had no idea that the Evo finals were like that. I remember hearing that the game happened and that you won, and that was it. But like,
that's
wow.
pretty much like I remember somebody mentioning it. I think it was in the AZ group or something, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, we have an Evo champion here too." And I was just like, "Who?" They're just like, "Oh, AJ," and I'm just like, "What?" I was like,
Yes,
"I didn't know that."
Yeah, that's the story. It's maybe less prestigious but more interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
A normal Evo champion. Definitely a point of conversation.
I mean, the idea of Clockwork, because Clockwork is a really fucking good player, like one of the all-time greats of any kind of Marvel game, and now he's a game developer, and so to beat him at the game that he made,
yeah.
Well played, sir. Well played.
There was a side quest in the fighting game community known as Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, where I also I beat Clockwork before and stuff in that game too.
Nice.
I'd been doing actually pretty okay in that game as well, but I wasn't too afraid of Clockwork because he'd been doing developer streams and stuff, and I'd run in there and I'd snipe, and it'd be really funny actually. But the fact that he'd like come up there, and actually while I was running a train in casuals, he came up to me. He's like, and I was like, "Hey man, are we gonna get to play?" He said, "I'll probably play you eventually." And I had no idea what that
meant. He probably, he's like, this kid's gonna win. And then I get to play him. That's so cool.
I mean, it was pretty dominant. I only lost 2 games, I think, or 3 games in general. One was to Jacko Man because my buttons were bad. So,
yeah, I mean, regardless of the number of entrants, I mean, Evo is a gathering of like the best of the best. I mean, it's just like, even if it's a 20-man ST tournament, it's like it's probably 18 to 20 people that are still playing that game hardcore and still know their stuff.
Absolutely.
And, it's an accomplishment in itself, man.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, I frequently like lean on like game mechanics and as far as like conversation for these kinds of episodes, but like the mental aspect of being a competitor in a fighting game is like it dwarfs the mechanics, like by and large. So like the idea of like being a strong player and then being able to sit in front of a crowd in an environment that you haven't played in before, in a stadium where people are cheering and screaming, and you're sweating from hot pot, like those kinds of experiences.
It's the worst food to play before that. It was absolutely the worst possible choice.
But the mental fortitude that comes from like not getting a fucking panic attack from doing that kind of stuff, like it's there's like a common thread that I've seen from talking with players like yourself or Angelic or Latif or Scott or SNK about like, and Abe too, like just thinking of like the confidence and the ability to even like recount the story, right? Like you can look back on it and cut your ego out of it. You can look back on it and understand the mental fortitude that was required for that situation, and understand that you didn't meet that, but you were still powered through it anyway, right? Like those are experiences I think that are really rare in our community. We all like to play these games, but to play at the highest level at the world stage, I have yet to do that. I don't think a lot of people in our scene have done that. And so it's really worth celebrating and pointing that out, that you have you've been up on that stage multiple times now, I guess. Well, the league was that an online event or was that an in-person event too?
Yeah, so that is also crazy because it was online, right? It
Okay.
was during the pandemic. That's also nuts. You talk about ego. That was a major place that I had to grow from to be able to take that one, I think. My ego has always been pretty bad. Like I said, I always had a pretty big chip on my shoulder because for some reason no one was like mentioning me in terms of video games, and I couldn't see it past myself to be like, well, I don't post on social media, I don't tell anybody about these things, and I don't go out to really anything. So of course that'd be the way that it is. But more than anything, I had to get to a point where I'm not looking for validation or approval through my gameplay, and I'm really happy to be there. I'm happy to see some of my closest friends actually every time to play some of my favorite video games. And I think just some mental germs that I had from back then, just the idea of like the only way to have fun is through winning and stuff, that stuff really kept me behind, I think, because that's not true. In fact, once you get to a certain point, winning it's almost just like relief. It's just relief. It's not even fun anymore, and that's yeah.
Winning is less productive than losing. I think that's a realization I came to recently. And that, like, if you frequently just go and try to find people that you can win against, then you're never going to find someone to battle test your strategies when you play against someone. You need somebody to kick your ass, really, in order to actually get better. And I think a lot of people, whether it's ego or fear or anxiety, I'm guilty of that too. Like, I will, like, if you're afraid of losing, then you're not gonna improve, right? And so a lot of people like to just sit in that winning category and then only play people of a certain level, and then they plateau and they ask themselves, why am I not getting any better? It's because you're not playing better players, because you're only trying to stick in your big fish in a small pond. And so that small pond could be your friend group, it could be your local scene, it could be your online friend group, it could be the online regional scene. I don't know, but like, as long as you stop, like, if you stop trying to find better opponents, you stagnate. And if you stop, I guess, what am I trying to say? If you're afraid of losing, basically, your ego's in the way and you're done. You're not going to get any better unless you go out there and you lose.
Yeah, that's a big thing. But the other thing was to also that getting better and winning at the video games is not actually the most important thing for video games, right? It's just to have fun. You're there to kill time mostly, and getting better and having money matches and having all these crazy high stakes is a side effect of you having fun, putting time into the game, and doing. You don't even really have to do well to get to those stages, really. But
good point.
Yeah, it's. I think winning perhaps is overvalued in this community.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, because I mean, a lot of, like you said, a lot of people are looking for that validation, right? Or they're looking for like a reason to kind of validate why they do what they do.
Yeah,
Especially
I'm a
if they
good
don't.
player.
Yeah, especially if they don't win a lot. Like,
Yeah.
you see that all the time, and I'm just like, I don't know. It's just like, maybe because I'm one of the older ones in the group, but it's just like, for me, I kind of got to a point to where, like, I wasn't necessarily worried about winning. Like, I kind of felt like, I always kind of make fun of it because it's my tag, Grandmaster B, and I was just like, I'm a B level player. Like, I'll own up to that, and I'm the gatekeeper. I'm the old vet, and like, I'll hold my own against some of the top players here and there. But for the most part, like, there's a certain level that I expect of myself just because of how much time I'm able to put in. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's something I'm perfectly fine with. And like, I've heard a lot of people talk about, like, well, I want to be at this level. And it's like, well, how much time are you putting in? How much are you willing to sacrifice? How much, work are you putting in to attain that level? And if you're not putting that effort into it, like, how can you expect that of yourself? And how can you put yourself down for that when you're not putting in that much into this? You know what I mean? And it's just like, that's just been a big thing for me. Like that I don't know, probably since I've gotten to Arizona 10 years ago, was just like, I didn't come in with any expectations that I was going to walk through these guys or anything like that. Like I've had good results here and there, and it's just like, but it's never something that's kind of like just killed my fun for a game. Like if I'm not having fun, I'm not going to play a game. Like that's just me. It's just like, oh, I'm not having fun. Like you bring, Marvel 3 is a big thing in your career, and it's just like, I love playing Marvel 3. I'm complete ass at it. I've lost 30, 40 games in a row to people, but like I'm having a ball. And like that to me is the biggest thing, because it's like, that guy's probably like, man, this guy's not learning anything, or he just keeps doing the same patterns or doing the same crap. And I'm just like, whatever. It's like, if I can get that one hit and get a combo off, like I'm perfectly happy. Like I'm having a ball.
And furthermore, like how many of your favorite FGC memories are of you winning?
I have my well, that's probably one of my favorites, but yeah.
Yeah, they're up there. They're for sure going to be up there. But are they all of them? Are they close to all of them?
Nah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking nights at Denny's. I'm thinking spending time with friends, catching up after 10 years on a podcast.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories is one time me and Aziz Akbar, we gaslit little Steve into thinking that Ryu was a good character, in Marvel 3.
Poor little Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good times,
It was you and him, like you guys got all of our like we're gonna treat you like kids thing. I remember that era too, and I was just like, because I think I was like in my early to mid 20s when you and Steve started showing up, and I didn't know how to like interact with kids at that point.
I think you did a great job. I think you made it feel like an actual safe place.
I appreciate that. It's interesting. I think that we're, one point I wanted to make, actually, I'm going to just rapidly shift topics here, is that I did get to see you go from a middle schooler to a high schooler to a college student, and now you're a working professional and Evo champion. And I always found it funny that Skillzdatkillz abbreviates to SDK, and you ended up with given your career field. So,
yeah, that's partially why I switched mostly to SDK, actually. Yeah, that's a great catch.
Okay. SDK stands for Software Development Kit for a lot of people, but also stands for Skillzdatkillz. So everything works.
Yes, sir. It worked out exactly.
Cool. Well, I do want to hear a little bit more about the Power Rangers competitive community, but we are running lower on time, and I had some just general questions about the game as a whole. So maybe in a future show, we'll have you back on and we'll talk through about what the World Championship was like, or the online championship for the battle for the Grid League was like. But again, I have some experience in versus games.
Right.
But yeah, in general, like Benny opened the show saying like I don't really care for team games anymore, and I've been trying to figure out like why that is, and I ultimately just lean on the excuse of I don't want to play more than one character, and I don't want to focus on more than one character for my opponent. But I'd like to hear from you as somebody who's played a variety of team games over the years. Like what about a 3v3 attracts you to a fighting game compared to a 1v1, and then as well as a 2v2? Like what do you like about Power Rangers or Marvel 3 or any of the 3v3 games like that's different than other fighting games?
Yeah, it's a lot of things that shouldn't be unique to 3v3 fighting games, but just kind of are. So expressive movement and expressive decision making, I think, are two of the key reasons why I would gravitate towards those games. Those games don't have to be the only place where those are, but for some reason, a lot of the other games are the 1v1 games are a lot slower, and they're more homogenized to certain play styles. I liken it a lot to card games in 3v3 format, where you have a lot of deck archetypes that all kind of coexist at the top, at least in the healthy meta. Okay. And building a team is a lot like building a deck. You can just pretty much think of your characters as like, it's a 3-character deck or something like that, and you just put it together, and that's what you got. Whereas with a 1v1 game, a lot of it, depending on how the game works, sometimes you have to learn 1v1 matchups at a really, really deep level, and sometimes you might have to pick multiple characters. I was an NRS player sometimes as well. I played Injustice, and that was a game where you had to play a bunch of different characters, and you had to know all of them like really, really, really well. And some of the minutia in 1v1s gets kind of hairy. I don't know if you play Tekken and stuff, but those move lists are pretty gigantic.
Sure.
And just when I was playing Street Fighter 4, also there are really specific interactions, because that's what 1v1 will ultimately boil down to is these kind of 0.1% optimizations that you can make on your opponent.
Okay.
Either that, or it becomes very homogenized, and they make a lot of the characters kind of feel samey, so that they gravitate in a direction that's easier to balance. Not to say that they're lacking any kind of personality or anything like that, but certain games, especially in the modern generation, kind of force you towards playing a certain way. You can't pick different win conditions and win with them anymore. You can't be like, oh, I'm gonna pick Phoenix, and if I get to 5 bars, I win, kind of deal. You have to, yeah. I mean, you have to pick a certain kind of win condition in most of these games, and then just you're kind of boxed in, I think.
Okay. If I could unpack that a little bit here. So there's it seems like for 1v1 games that the characters have a lot more, I hate to use this word, but it feels like they have a lot more depth to them.
And sometimes, yeah.
Those unique interactions that you're talking about is the depth that I'm talking about, that makes them more complicated and there's more nuanced, right? And I actually think one of the strengths of a 3v3 game or a team-based game in general is that because the characters are more shallow, you can get closer to the expression between the two players much faster. In that my team isn't, Zero Dante Virgil, it's Zero May Cry. And so I end up playing a cohesive team, and then the individual characters don't have to be deep. It's the team itself that's deep. And then in turn, that's the card game deck that you're talking about, where it's like my deck has a built-in win condition, and I'm trying to execute that win condition independent of the matchup, so to speak, less dependent on the matchup than a 1v1 game. Am I out base on that one, or does that seem like a decent
roundabout? I'd say that obviously you're always playing towards a win condition. Everyone's trying to win somehow, right?
Sure.
And where I would say with Street Fighter, it's just everybody's playing towards the same win condition in the, depending on whatever meta is, whether it's achieving, you're beating them through honest footsies, right? That's a win condition or something.
Sure.
I want to hit V trigger and go crazy and explode my opponent. That's another win condition that a lot of characters have and is very similar. I think the depth that you're talking about, that's probably also a more nuanced topic, because again, those things don't have to be exclusive to 1v1s and 3v3s, right? Arguably, if you count it, the most successful 1v1 fighting game is Smash Bros.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right? Which you wouldn't say that they don't have depth, because that's not true. That's just patently like false, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, the nuance of the interactions gets a lot more magnified, I think, in 1v1s, especially within teeny tiny interactions. My stand forward has like a little gap underneath its foot, so you can sneak in your sweep and that kind of thing.
Well, so you mentioned the homogeneity as well, of like, how a lot of Street Fighter characters, they fit that archetype, and you just kind of have to stick with that. But I've noticed in 3v3 games, particularly Marvel and Dragon Ball, the ones that I'm most familiar with, there's a concept of shells that happens a lot, where you have like a Doom Virgil shell, or a Zero Dante shell, or a Dante something shell. I can't remember off the top of my head. And in a lot of I remember, like, isn't Surge's team Deadpool Dante Strider? Like, so you could put anybody in front of Dante Strider and they'd be good. So it's and Deadpool apparently is really good. So shout out to Surge for finding that shit out. But Like, what I'm trying to say is, like, isn't everyone's kind of pursuing homogeneity anyway in the team-based game in the pursuit of shells? Is that even a thing in Power Rangers? Are there shells in Power Rangers?
Well, the Power Rangers is a strange case, right? There are shells and whatnot, but the express, I should lean away from esoteric terms like expressivity and stuff. Let me say the freedom that you have within when you can tag makes it so it matters less.
Okay.
And there are some tools that are given to a lot of people or characters in that cast to where you can do well with quite a few characters. But yeah, you should always have a couple of the top tiers on your team. And I think that it doesn't necessarily mean character choice, right? Character choice, I think, gets conflated with homogeneity. You see 5 Virgils or 5 Zeros in top 8 or whatever, but if they're all playing differently, I don't really think that that's the same thing. Again, it's kind of fringe, but melee, right? We're not all on the same page if that's a fighting game or not, but I think it's kind of similar enough to where you can draw the conclusion. But
agree.
There'll be a bunch of Foxes and Marths in the top 8. There's only a couple characters who are going to ever see that, and I guess you have some exceptions like a Amsa or an Axe or something. But for the most part, you have the top tier characters in the top tier of the results all play differently. Okay. Where, a game like Street Fighter V, it's more about like who can do the thing better. Like the way that you play Street Fighter V is very similar approaches, but who can do that approach the best? That's
like how there's a zoning archetype or the Shoto archetype, and you just play the best of that archetype, right? Like Luke or Sim. Why play Minot when you can play Sim? Why play Akuma when you can play Luke, right?
At another level, I don't think that there's a lot of real like zoning in that game, and a lot of it does kind of fall back to like well, I don't know what kind of distance you call it, maybe crouch strong range, if you can picture that in your head.
Mm-hmm.
At the distance where two characters are relatively close to each other mostly, which is I would say a departure from a lot of games where in Street Fighter where you'd probably be like a fireball away at the range where maybe you could jump in on somebody's fireball and smack them in the face kind of deal. This is one of those games where, because it's up close most of the time, even for the zoners, Dalsim is still usually going to do crouch heavy punch into like EX Flame, and he's going to run a whole bunch of mix. It's not really what I would call zoning,
Sure.
Or it's not the primary win condition. All the primary win conditions end up being around like pressure and
being plus.
And stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay. I guess I had a couple other questions about Power Rangers, and I'm just going to try to squeeze them in because I know we're low on time here. So is there... Well, actually, let me take a step back. So while we were talking about this this particular topic about shells, it kind of got me thinking about shells is the wrong way to put it. It's more like roles, where like in Marvel 3, those shells that I was talking about, like Doom Virgil is a good example, where Doom played an assist role and Virgil played an anchor role, and very rarely would they leave that. They could leave that, and if someone with Doom on point could go ham, but by and large, like they were stuck in those roles. Is Power Rangers, you mentioned that because of the freedom of tagging, does Power Rangers have like the concept of a assist character only or a anchor character only, or is it that fluid where you switch between them freely and everybody can play a bunch of different roles?
You eventually get to the roles, right? But you just don't have to start them in that order, which is, I think, pretty interesting, because you can tag your anchor out at any point after the 99 gambit or whatever. Let's say that, Virgil has a pretty good round start in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 due to his ability to option select throws both on the ground and the air.
Yeah.
But it's kind of seen as a waste sometimes because, you don't get Virgil anchor. But in Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, you could run somebody with a really strong opening gambit and then immediately rotate them to the back so that they're most of the time playing that assist role. The way that I ended up playing it was I played my support character, in quotes, in the front. So I'd play the 99 gambit there, the opening gambit between the opponent. I'd immediately switch out to my second character, and then I'd run my game plan from there. But yeah, you're switching out all the time so that you can actually control which way your team ends up by the end of the match a lot easier.
Okay.
But they all have pretty set, defined roles, although you won't find as big a struggle, I guess, with some of the characters compared to like a Marvel 2 or Marvel 3 kind of deal.
Okay, fair enough. And then in the chat here, Nam is mentioning that we're talking about functions and not rules. I'm like,
hey,
yeah, what roles do the X-Men fill in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Nam?
Hey.
Ouch. That's harsh. Oh, man. I love you, Nam. We need to have him back on the show, too. We should do like like a little Marvel reunion. I was going to say all Asians, and then I was like, that's probably too much. And then I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. That's what it would be.
I had a question in terms of in terms of Power Rangers. It's like, was there any did you have any attachment to like Power Rangers? Did you watch it growing up or anything like that before you started playing it at all, or was it just like you just saw it as a fighting game and were like, this looks, I want to play this?
Are they functions?
I didn't have a huge attachment to them. I liked the aesthetics of some of them. I think I wound up with a couple of Power Rangers action figures over the years and stuff. Maybe anyone would, right? Just by existing and like buying some toys, you get them sometimes. But no, I didn't have a huge attachment to the Power Rangers franchise, and yet here I am. I'm a homeowner because I played a Power Rangers video game.
Oh, really?
Crazy.
Or wait, we gotta talk. Is that related more to the league or to Evo?
That's with the league because that ended up being like a 10K prize.
Yeah,
and stuff.
I was just looking at that. Yeah,
yeah.
I think you're probably the only person I know that's bought a home with tournament winnings in Arizona.
At least for like closing prices and stuff. I mean, I obviously had my own like money saved up and stuff, but in that climate, it came in really clutch to cover off all the closing costs and whatnot.
It was during the pandemic too. You bought a house during the pandemic when the market was like.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like I'm here, so like that's what happened. I mean,
wow. Congratulations. I want to find out more about that someday. Yeah.
That'd be an interesting thing to look at in terms of like the winnings, like who's won the most winnings in Arizona. Like, I mean, just the fact that you won a 5-figure pot, like I think that might even put you at the top already. Because there's all that talk about Evo, and like Evo prize pot is nothing. And like our highest placers, Latif in 2011 with a second in Street Fighter, and Angelic with a couple third places, and it's just like, there's not a ton of money in that. So
I know that Armando got less for the first Evo. He got third in less than the Power Rangers one. I know that it wasn't.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, you might eclipse them all just by winning that other world championship.
Yeah, and they weren't stingy either with other pot prizes like leading up to it too. So it was still like a couple thousand, and I was streaming a lot more and stuff. So you'd get a couple hundred and stuff from there. It was really bonkers. Like that side of things is where that part got crazy. Something that I never really would have thought about and stuff. But yeah, I have like a Wikipedia page. You can check my earnings and stuff.
No shit.
That's what I was looking at. Yeah, that's where I looked it up.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. I just continually just get get surprised by, hey, AJ did really well in fighting games. It's just like 10 years ago. Hey, AJ did really well.
I'm exactly in the same spot. Nobody has no one would put me up there, I think, if they were thinking about like the Arizona like top players or whatever like that. But statistically, hey, I'm not doing too bad.
Yeah, well, it'll be on the record of the Absolute Guard podcast at least. Very cool. Well, we're about out of time here, so do you have any shout outs or anything you'd like to plug?
I mean, follow me, I guess, on Twitter, Skillzdatkillz 6.
With two Z's.
Skillzdatkillz. Yes, both of them have Z's in there. Yep. And then, obviously shout out to my amazing girlfriend who had been with me through the whole ride and really kind of, pushed me forward and allowed me to realize my final form.
Yeah, I mean, that Taco Bell story is crazy, right? Like, I mean, who would be sitting in the middle of a Taco Bell and you're with your girlfriend and you're like, I think I could win this, and like, how many other girlfriends would have been like, you're crazy, like you're talking out of your, whatever, and
Yep.
she's just like, well, let's go then.
Yeah. And she drove and everything. Like she was like really down for it.
Go home
Nice.
and family
That's
man
awesome,
used to
man.
be like a really go home and be a family man used to be a really big thing in our community. Like you would just hit a point where you just left the community because you got a girlfriend or had kids or whatever. But nowadays, like there are people that are still in the fighting game community because their spouses are really supportive, and I think all three of us on this call have that that experience. So thank you for letting us play these games. Cool. Well, cool. We'll call it here. Thanks very much for being on the show, AJ, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah. See ya.
See y'all.